Welcome to this presentation of Thematix Architecture for Business, a short course in the field known as business architecture. This presentation is from a live recording made by Thematix partners in August 2021. We hope you find it useful and interesting. If you should need further background, we provide contact information at the end of the presentation. Your presenters are Robert Cost, a partner at Thematix, who appears in the first half of the presentation, and Jim Ryan, also a partner, who appears in the second half. We hope you enjoy this, and let's begin.
So this relates to our own perfection of this craft known as business architecture, which we call Thematix Architecture for Business. But it's germane to a field known as business architecture, promulgated by an organization called the Business Architecture Guild. I want to talk real quickly about our agenda today, what we hope to accomplish. First of all, obviously, describe what is business architecture. And as a practical matter, the answer to this question will lie in what you can do with this. And this presentation is really given over to showing you examples of what you can do with it. We'll begin with an internal stakeholder business case. So this is something oriented toward the internals of the operation of a particular business that we worked with in the past, which will show you business architecture's value as a diagnostic tool. We'll move to another example of how business architecture can be used in a strategy role to help design and implement strategic initiatives within a company. We'll provide a summarization of the value of business architecture, or what we think the value is, and suggest for directions for how you might pursue it after this presentation is over. And then, of course, we'll entertain questions and answers really at any point in the presentation, but certainly at the end if you think it best to hold your questions. Okay, so real quick introduction to who Thematix is and who we are as individuals here. Thematix was founded in 2011 and has two principal kinds of services and deliverables. The first is business architecture, which this presentation concerns, which involves us constructing architectures for clients and help train them in the practice of business architecture. We also provide implementation and training in a field known as semantic technology, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. We construct models for businesses called ontologies. And business architecture and ontology have deep relationships that we're not going to go into right now. My partner, Jim Ryan, and also my co-presenter, is a principal at Thematix, one of the founders of the Business Architecture Guild, which is an association that's developed a business architecture methodology which standardizes business architecture practice throughout the world. Jim is also the editor of an emerging business architecture core meta model specification for the object management group. Jim's retired from IBM in 2009, and he was a distinguished engineer and chief technology officer of the IBM Worldwide Center for Excellence in Banking. Jim has a PhD in computer science from the University of Texas. Lisa Kendall, not speaking today unless called on, but she's certainly welcome, is a principal, and with Jim also provides the semantic technology credentials that are somewhat unique to Thematix. Lisa's on the board of the object management group, and she's a world-renowned engineer and author of an important standard known as FIBO, or the Financial Industry Business Ontology. Semantics may eventually become relevant to Wolters Kluwer as it explores ways of having machines analyze and classify, search, and reason about its voluminous legal material, but we won't treat of that explicitly here today. Our partner, Larry Smith, is a partner who brings really substantial product marketing and project management expertise to our engagements. Larry's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to marketing related technologies in e-commerce. And finally, I, Robert Cost, also co-founded Thematix with my partners, and before that was involved in a travel technology company called Portaga. And before that, with a company called US Interactive, which was on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. And that's where I actually met Ken Crutchfield some years ago, before both of us became gray guys. And before that, I worked with an IBM company called Prodigy that was a sort of a predecessor to the internet. And before that, I worked as an attorney with the US Congress. We're here today and available for questions, and Jim and I are about to launch on our presentation. So without kind of further ado, unless anyone has questions, let's get started. I want to have Jim answer this question, why business architecture, and have us really establish, why the discipline exists and what it's relevant to and useful for. So, Jim, please feel free to take over.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Can you guys hear me okay?
I think so, Jim.
Yes. Good, okay. All right, what is business architecture? We have to answer that question before we get into why we want to use it. Okay, so it's a set of concepts for representing a business and also representing the value that that business provides to its customers. It's unique in several ways. It looks to simplify the structures and functions of a business so that you don't get lost in details of an org chart. It looks at a business from the perspective of a customer's needs and wants. And it looks at also how the value produced by the business aligns with those needs and wants. It integrates with other information or models that you might have of a business, like business process descriptions, organization charts, marketing tools like customer journeys, in order to support business analysis. And you'll learn a lot more about business architecture in the business scenarios that we're going to be talking about. But first of all, let's look at some common business problems that are encountered by business analysts where business architecture can be useful. So in this case, we have a corporate strategy that has come down from the executive steering committee. And these analysts are trying to figure out how to translate the strategy objectives into initiatives and projects. And this is complicated because businesses aren't simple. And strategy objectives are always qualified by instructions to get them implemented yesterday and don't spend any money. All of the managers have pet projects they want to get done in the context of meeting the strategy objectives. The business analysts in this picture are grappling with all of these problems. One of the analysts that's trained in business architecture suggests looking at the potential effect of the digital transformation objectives on the business value streams. Business value streams are one of the concepts that we find in business architecture. While a digital transformation may make a business more efficient, it had better increase customer satisfaction as well. For example, a digital transformation may make it easier for a customer to find a product or a service. A value stream representing marketing actions determines how easily a customer can find the product or the service they're looking for. Some of these actions attempt to find out how customers search for products and services and how this knowledge will be important in designing the digital transformation. In addition, focusing on value streams will help the analyst concentrate on the business changes that will improve this value creation and avoid work that is unlikely to improve value creation. The next scenario features a couple of business analysts who are trying to figure out why a crucial business report is not being delivered on time. The business analysts in this scenario are struggling with operational complexity. We'll go into this scenario in a little bit and show how business architecture concepts can be used to deal with operational complexity. Business capabilities represent what a business does without getting into detail about how. For example, a business that produces cardboard boxes in various shapes and sizes must cut and glue the cardboard stock. This business would have a cutting capability and a gluing capability. An inefficient business might use a different gluing and cutting process for each size and shape of cardboard box. There could be hundreds of cutting processes implementing the cutting capability. A more efficient business would analyze the cutting and gluing process to see what systematic variations could be implemented to reduce the processing complexity. Business complexity is a systemic problem in many businesses. It often occurs when businesses grow without paying attention to increasing operating complexity. In the remainder of the presentation, we're going to explain and demonstrate the key ideas and concepts of business architecture in two business cases. The first business case that I'm going to talk to you about will focus on the management of complexity in order to deliver value to an internal customer of a securities trading operation. So the first business case we look at today is about internal stakeholders who are not satisfied with the quality and timeliness of the internal product they're receiving. We'll show how business architecture concepts are used to diagnose problems and define solutions. We begin the business case with a description of the business context and the stakeholders. This business is a securities trading operation. It deals in a variety of securities. Some are unique and thinly traded, while others are common and traded in open markets where pricing information is readily available. Trading controls is an audit activity that provides valuation and portfolio risk assessments that are independent of the trading desk, whose compensation is determined by trading profits and adherence to risk guidelines. The internal stakeholder is trading management, who receive periodic reports on valuation and risk from the trading controls activity, and they set future profit and risk guidelines. The securities trading regulator is an external stakeholder in this business case. We won't discuss that today because of the time limits, but business architecture also addresses the needs and requirements of external stakeholders like securities trading regulators. I'll be happy to go into this in more detail if you have some questions. Our contact information at the end of the presentation is available to you if you wish to explore a business issue that you have and seek to find out if business architecture would help you solve the problems. Some of the many considerations in valuation and risk assessment are listed here. As mentioned earlier, trading management was not satisfied with the quality and timeliness of the valuation, profit and loss, and risk reports they were receiving. The sponsoring executive for this business case thought that the proximate causes for these problems were process complexity and lack of IT support, and was looking for a way to demonstrate these causes to the executives in the trading controls activity that would offer insights into a solution. We interviewed trading management and collated the information in these interviews. We also interviewed subject matter experts in the trading control activities in order to define the value streams and the business process architecture and the capabilities. In the first step, we engaged the subject matter experts in the construction of a trading control value stream that you see here. This step provoked some pushback from some of the SMEs who thought we were just trying to create another process description of their activities. They already had several of these. However, they began to realize that the exercise was designed to help them think about the value of the products that they created and not about the process that was used to create the products. It also forced them to think about how their stakeholders saw that value and where the essential elements of accuracy, usability, and timeliness came from. Accuracy results from the aggregation of quality sourcing of trade, price, and risk information, accurate execution of the valuation processes, the ability to compare evaluations and risk against prior evaluation and risk to establish trajectories, the ability to quickly and transparently deal with errors. These four characteristics determine the stages in the value stream and are shown in the callouts below each stage. The red dotted lines show that these characteristics are important factors in the value seen by trading management. In the next slide, we're going to give you some business architecture vocabulary to use when talking about value streams and diagramming them. Business architecture provides 5 primary concepts and 5 primary relationships that define value streams. Value propositions describe the elements of value the business intends to provide to each stakeholder. Stakeholders describe the ideal element of value the stakeholder would like to receive. Value fit describes the degree to which the value proposition satisfies the stakeholder. Value items are elements of value that aggregate to the value proposition. Value stream stages abstractly describe what is done to create value items. And a value stream is the collection of value stream stages and their value items. Value stream stages aren't processes. We typically draw them in some left to right manner, and the underlying processes may be executed in a different order and may contain loops and branches. The key principle of business architecture is the separation of value creation from the actual processes that may be executed. This separation encourages thinking about the different ways that value can be produced. To be useful in analysis, value streams must be connected to some model of operations, and we see this connection in the next chart. Here, we've abstractly described the business activities that underlie the value streams of the business. They are represented in the diagram as rectangles. Activities such as control process management are performed in every stage of the value stream. An activity such as trade acquisition, on the other hand, is only performed in the acquire and correct data value stream stage. This performance relationship is conventionally shown by aligning these activities under the value stream stage they are performed in. An analysis may result in identifying some problems with the performance of these activities. The activities can be colored to indicate the severity of these problems. The notes describe the nature of each problem identified in the analysis. The analysis is done jointly by subject matter experts and business architects. In this case, the analysis was driven by failures to produce the information that trading management needed in a timely manner. The analysis discovered over 1,000 different ways valuation control had specified the value assessment to be performed. Historically, this was because of growth of the organization without periodic simplification and automation of the processes. In the next slide, we present some more business architecture vocabulary to use when talking about these kinds of business issues. Business architecture uses the term capability to represent the activities you saw in the previous slide. The complete set of important capabilities needed by a business is called a capability map. Capability maps are usually represented as rectangular grids or in a kind of visual hierarchy called a tree map. Capabilities are also represented as shown before, where they are aligned with the value stream stages of a value stream. Note that a capability may be performed in several value stream stages of the same or different value streams. Capabilities are also abstract. They represent all variations of activities that produce the same kind of outcome. For example, the determination of a price for a security trade. A capability map will never have more than one capability of a kind, representing all the different ways the business may perform that capability. For example, a business may produce several different products in a product line. Business must have a capability to test those products. The actual processes and activities used in the testing capability may vary by product, but there's only one testing capability in the capability map. This principle of business architecture helps the analyst deal with complexity by grouping process variations under a single capability. Value items represent the values applied to outcomes because the same outcome may be seen as having different values by different stakeholders. For example, a price reduction outcome may be seen positively by a customer, but negatively by a shareholder because the profit is also reduced. The next slide will show how capabilities can be related together by their outcomes to assist in proximate and root cause analysis and downstream impact analysis. To produce the controlled value of a trade, the controlled process management capability periodically initiates the valuation capability. The outcome of the controlled process management capability is the initiation of the value capability. This outcome flow of the valuation capability initiation to the valuation capability is represented by the dotted arrow connecting the two capabilities. There are many different ways to produce an initial valuation of a trade. Capability mapping groups them all together. The most common way is to take the actual price of a trade as recorded in the trading system. However, this price may be an error or an outlier. The initial value determined for a trade is an outcome of valuation that is received by the valuation control capability, whose task it is to compare this trade price with similar trades. The outcome is a controlled price that may differ from the trade price. An explanation of the controlled price is also provided as part of the outcome. For example, that the trade price appears to have an extra zero in the integer part, probably a keying error by the trader. This outcome flow is also shown as a dotted arrow between the valuation and the valuation control capabilities. These three capabilities have been colored red to show that there are problems with the outcomes that they produce. The problems are described in the callouts. The problems in controlled process management result in a loss of timeliness and quality. The problems in valuation impede the examination of the causes of differences between the initial valuation and the controlled valuation because the source of the initial valuation was lost. After looking at the previous slide and the supporting data and the capability and value maps, the sponsoring executive and staff are proposing some actions that are intended to resolve the problems with these capabilities. The largest action effort is the establishment of a master tool set and related user training. However, without the establishment of governance capabilities, the effect of this tool set and training will diminish over time with the addition of new financial instruments, regulatory changes, and changes in policy and best practices. Documentation of the processes, exceptions, and valuation models facilitate the diagnosis and correction of difference between initial valuations and controlled valuations. This slide and the previous one provide a targeted and concise description of the analysis findings and action recommendations. The connection between the capability and the value stream stages indicates the impacts the actions are expected to have on the value delivered to internal customers. Business architecture concepts such as value streams, capabilities, and outcomes are tools to help the business architect execute the analysis and transformation stages of a business transformation method. The method begins with the identification of the customers and the statement of the problem in terms of gaps between the intended value proposition and the value delivered as seen by the customer. Customer interviews create the primary interview input to this stage. The second stage is a causal analysis that identifies capabilities where performance failures result in contributions to the value gaps. However, the performance problems may originate in a prior capability. Root cause analysis traces the outcome flows backward through the capabilities until the root causes are found. The transformation process begins with a statement of the objectives of the transformation, stated as improvements in the value delivered to the customer. The second step analyzes the various transformation options that could be used to produce the delivered value improvements. The changes defined for each option will impact capabilities. Each impact is analyzed to determine its impact, risk, and likelihood to produce the delivered value improvement. This analysis is used to help executives determine the transformation plan. In the final stage, the analysis of the chosen transformation on the business architecture is used to monitor the transformation initiatives and create progress reports. Business architecture by itself can't be used to carry out these analyses. It summarizes and abstracts the real details of business operations to facilitate insight and focus executive attention on critical issues. It must also reflect the real details of the business. The dashed arrows in this diagram represent linkages between the business architecture view of the business and information artifacts that record business operating details that are typically contained in policy documents, procedure manuals, organization charts, asset inventories, personnel records, financial records, vendor contracts, and operating data, just to list a few. These business operating details are the primary sources for the analysis, which must review them, link them to the appropriate business architecture concept, and summarize performance and quality information. If the linkages shown as dashed arrows can be maintained in electronic form, the business architecture then becomes a table of contents to the mass of primary sources, saving hours of time that would otherwise be spent searching for documents to support the analysis. The practice of business architecture provides the analysts with a framework and a method for tackling business analysis problems and providing action recommendations. Defining value streams keeps the analytic focus on the improvement of value delivered without getting sidetracked by localized effectiveness issues. Defining capabilities helps the analyst master the complexity of a modern business. Linking value streams to capabilities allows the analyst to determine the operating causes of value gaps. These value streams and linked capabilities provide a way to summarize progress toward the value improvement objective of change initiatives. Now I'm going to ask Rob to take over and talk about the next business case, which has to do with determining a path in order to implement some strategic objectives. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Okay, so you just saw how business architecture tools can be used to diagnose and address problematic business practices. But in this part of the presentation, we're going to explore how these same business architecture tools can be used to build new business structures that help the business accomplish its strategic objectives. And if I could get Rob to click this thing. Okay. So we're going to use an experience Thematix had with a large international auction house. Now, like any other auction house, its business model consisted of creating and operating auctions for expensive and often one-of-a-kind goods. Its customers were both buyers and sellers, both typically extremely wealthy individuals who were catered to on a one-by-one basis by a client specialist who knew their collections and their appetites and their disposable wealth. This market of so-called managed customers were already auction house customers, and their numbers were unlikely to grow significantly. But the auction house was determined to expand to a much larger segment of customers whose relationships with the company were less mediated by specialists and whose purchases and sales were somewhat more modest, typically in the range of, only $500,000 to $5 million in purchase size. This was the so-called unmanaged customer market. But the problem was that the auction house was ill-equipped to communicate and do business with these unmanaged customers. The in-person systems that it had put in place to govern the managed market would not scale to tens of thousands of customers it was seeking to do business with. So the auction house had three basic objectives with respect to this unmanaged market. First, it had to identify the most valuable segments that comprised it by gathering and analyzing data. And two, it had to expand its marketing and sales initiatives to target these segments by reaching out to them and by continually providing new value to them. And three, it had to increase the profit margin associated with members of these new segments. To achieve these objectives, the auction house's basic strategy was to build an altogether new and scalable business alongside its established business. And to do this, it determined to create a business, an architecture of the business that would allow it to identify what capabilities it could use as is and what capabilities it would have to either modify or create from scratch. Once a business architecture was fully described, it could proceed to establish and execute initiatives to bring about these changes in the business operations. Well, because the challenge was to rebuild the business around a new kind of customer, the first step was to understand that customer's behavior as a series of continuous historical touch points that we call a customer journey. Getting this customer from the state of being an indifferent prospect to an active bidder or seller would involve understanding where in the customer's journey the auction house could intervene to provide value, and so persuade the individual to do business with the auction house. The customer journey consisted of basically four stages. The stage at which the customer became aware of and sought out the kind of premium goods that the auctioneer had for auction. And two, the stage at which the customer evaluates the goods the auction has or assesses the market value for their own goods. And three, the stage at which the customer actually acquires or sells the goods at auction. And finally, four, the period after the auction where the customer might buy or sell again. The auction house used its understanding of the customer journey to design value propositions that would meet the customer at each stage in their journey and provide an action or communication that would address the customer's want or desire at that stage. Thus, when a customer was looking for a preferred source of premium goods to add to his or her collection or to invest in, he or she would be provided the information they sought about the auction house and its marketplace. When the customer was evaluating different classes of goods in a category, say vintage motorcycles or rare wines or elaborate furniture, or if they were understanding classes or markets for their own goods, the auction house could satisfy that need. And then when the customer had decided to act and to buy or sell goods, the auction house would provide and support the auction and its bidders and sellers. And finally, after the auction house would speak to the customer about the future and about other goods the bidder might be interested in, or other goods the customer owns that could be auctioned. To deliver these value propositions, right, the auction house had to identify the tasks it had to perform to assemble the elements of value that constitute the value proposition. In other words, what is the end-to-end set of activities necessary to create a result that the customer will value and act upon? This set of tasks for each value proposition is called a value stream, which Jim introduced in the last conversation, and they're shown as blue chevrons in this diagram. So for example, let's suppose that a recent lottery winner has, on the advice of a friend, decided to put some of their money in rare antiquities. They want to know what the best place for investing in goods whose provenance is unquestionable and where there exists a wide marketplace of both buyers and sellers for this specific kind of good. They are in stage one of their customer journey. The auction house should, if possible, answer this customer's question in a direct, timely, and relevant way so as to its premium good. To do so, it's going to undertake the tasks shown in the attract new registrant value stream, the topmost value stream. First, it has to define a segment for this kind of customer, and then properly attribute criteria for the individuals to create a list that actually includes this customer. Then it has to create and execute campaigns for the communications to this customer. And finally, it has to properly manage responses to this customer in such a way as to move them to the next stage in their journey. Of course, the analysis does not end with identifying the tasks to be done. What the auction house must consider is what it must be capable of doing in order to carry out these tasks. It must also identify the capabilities necessary to carry out each stage of the value stream. So, for example, in this conduct event value stream, whose value proposition is to invite, manage, and admit customers to an auction of specific items, the materials creation capability found in the first part of the first value stream stage called setup event. In the conduct, the materials creation capability stands for the ability of the business to conceive and render the materials that will be used to communicate with the customer concerning an auction event, such as the types of items to be auctioned and how to register and participate. A given capability may be comprised of other lower level capabilities that produce outcomes that are aggregated and used by other capabilities. The materials creation capability might, for example, be comprised of lower level capabilities, such as creative ideation, artistic rendering, copywriting, creative production, and the like. These capabilities are ultimately realized at an operational level by organizations that have the skill or knowledge to create these outcomes, or they may be realized by automated systems to produce other outcomes. Our auction customer had, as you will see, already predisposed itself to using technology where possible to create these capabilities. Having a value stream capability map enables us to diagnose and construct the capabilities necessary to fulfill the value stream. In this example, the auctioneer had determined that although it already had the capabilities necessary to conduct an auction event, some of them were deficient and some were entirely lacking. Specifically, the business intelligence script definition and automation capability is deficient because it does not permit the auctioneer to properly segment the customers to whom the event messages are going to be sent. In addition, because the auctioneer never before dealt with an unmanaged market, it's unable to import and transform the data concerning this market into its IT systems for building targeted lists. The deficiencies in and non-existence of capabilities forms the basis for stating requirements. In this example, the lack of data import capabilities means that some kind of bridge had to be built between the new data about the unmanaged market and the existing systems for storing and processing that data. An informed evaluation of possible solutions presents several different alternatives here. The company might build no bridge at all, in which case its ability to conduct an auction event that is targeted to the unmanaged market becomes infeasible. Or it might use manual human processes to extract data from various sources and modify the data so it can be added to the existing customer databases. This might avoid large initial expense since existing staff could be redeployed for this purpose. However, it's not likely to scale to the large number of records, and it will entail large ongoing labor costs. The company ultimately decides to build the bridge as an IT system, software or hardware that fulfills the missing capabilities. Based on an understanding of the required outcomes, the company can begin to develop requirements for the proposed solution. Because the incoming data about the unmanaged market will come from disparate sources and be organized differently, software has to be built that will extract the relevant data, clean it of inaccurate or malformed data, and transform it into an existing structure and load it into the company's internal system. This system must do this on an ongoing basis and for all newly acquired data. The requirements derived from the capability analysis can be mapped to parts of the system architecture that they affect. In this case, the requirements for target data import and transformation pertain to the integration code between the SAP, brand name, the software system, right? SAP BI system, their business intelligence system, and the Salesforce CRM, a customer relationship management system, which will be ultimately used to communicate event information to customers. Thus, we can show traceability from a fairly detailed technical requirements document all the way up to strategic objectives. In the foregoing example, we saw a specific instance of a more general methodology used by business architects in approaching their work. The first step is to get the company to articulate its strategic objectives and the general approach it'll take to achieving those objectives. This is essentially a top-down activity and the responsibility typically of senior management. Next, you need to develop an understanding of the customer and their characteristics. This includes understanding their behavior and motivation as articulated in the customer journey that we walked through above. We then need to formulate and capture value propositions that will fulfill our customer objectives. Once the customer value propositions are well understood, we need to define the value streams and capabilities needed to produce them. This analysis then turns inward and requires that we assess the capabilities we already have against the capabilities that are required for the proposed value stream. We'll then map those capabilities to the operating model elements to assess what has to be done concretely in the business, organizationally or technologically, to fulfill the capabilities necessary for the value stream. At this point, we're ready to begin to record requirements and solution choices, managing them across various stakeholders within the business and across the business analysts and enterprise architects charged with the solution construction. And then finally, during the construction of the initiative to bring these things about, we'll have to find ways of measuring and organizing and providing feedback on our progress. The business architect forms a kind of reference point for this kind of measurement. Okay, so let's see if we can summarize, wrap up here, and see what potential future directions all of this might point to. Click. All right, so having worked through the abstract concepts of business architecture and shown a couple of examples of its diagnostic and strategic use, let's return once again to the question of its value. I hope we've been successful in illustrating that the value for a business architecture practice provides is strategic and supports transformational initiatives in support of strategic objectives. I hope we've also shown that its value is also tactical, supporting the business in identifying and diagnosing problematic operational areas. I'd suggest that also the business architecture is extremely valuable in maintaining a value-oriented focus for customer initiatives. It is all too easy to get lost in the weeds of process flows and to lose sight of the value proposition the given initiative is trained on. Business architecture also supplies a common language across management, technology, and operations staff, so that we can all use the same terminology to indicate the same value stream states, capabilities, and other business entities. Finally, the business architecture helps address complexity. Some problems are so complex in their concrete detail that it may be impossible to actually tease all of the items that need to be addressed out. And business architecture really provides a powerful tool for simplifying this kind of complexity. What's necessary is a simplifying abstraction, which allows us to understand the problem at a high level and return with a solution to the concrete business operational detail.